60% of cognoscentient. That's our final offer. Take it or walk away.
Imagine you're in a boardroom on the 60th floor of a Boston skyscraper. Outside, cold glass and steel walls overlook the poetic Charles River. But inside, the air is thick with tension, so dense you could cut it with a knife. On one side of the table is Liam Sterling, a young tech CEO, his face pale, cold sweat beading on his forehead. His empire, cognoscentient, built with every ounce of his heart, sweat, and tears, a dream to create AI that detects Alzheimer's early so no one endures the pain of losing a loved one as he did. Teeters on the edge of collapse, one signature away from ruin. Across the table sits the embodiment of power. Mr. Tan Kian Min, a financial titan from Singapore, his face carved from granite, showing no trace of emotion. Beside him is his son, David Tan, sharp-eyed, but with something unreadable beneath. The negotiation has dragged on for 3 grueling hours, and now the verdict looms. Mr. Tan speaks, his voice low and icy. 60% of cognoscentient. That's the final offer. Take it or leave it. 60%. It's no longer an investment. It's a ruthless takeover. Liam feels his chest constrict. He thinks of his father, of hundreds of employees and their families. He's lost. It's over. And then, in that deadly silence, a voice rises. Not Liam's, not the financial giant's. It's clear, steady, and comes from the last place anyone expects. All eyes turn to the end of the table, where a 9-year-old girl, Elara Park, daughter of the building's janitor, whom Liam desperately brought in, hoping her Korean language skills could help, quietly stands. She doesn't look at Liam. She doesn't look at the powerful billionaire, Mr. Tan. Her sharp, soulful eyes lock onto the son, David Tan. And then, in flawless, formal Korean, she asks a simple question, its weight enough to shake the room. Sir, what do you think true wealth is? Control or creation? That moment, dear audience, sparks an unimaginable chain of dominoes. A journey from bitter betrayal, buried tech secrets, a billion-dollar legacy unveiled, to a public showdown with a ruthless enemy emerging from the shadows. The story I'm about to tell you isn't just about saving a company. It's a lesson that courage can come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the right question is more powerful than any weapon in the world. Stay with me. And now, let's rewind 48 hours to when the storm began. 48 hours before a 9-year-old's question shaped fate, Liam Sterling wasn't a warrior. He was a man on the verge of defeat. His office on the 45th floor, overlooking Boston's skyline, wasn't just a workspace. It was a shrine to his dream. Transparent glass walls were covered in complex algorithm equations. A massive whiteboard overflowed with logic diagrams and scribbled notes. On his desk, amid papers and models, sat a single, faded photo. An older man with salt and pepper hair, smiling kindly beside a teenage Liam. His father, the origin and purpose of it all. A sharp ping from his computer snapped him out of his thoughts. He glanced at the screen, and his heart plummeted into a bottomless abyss. An email from the last domestic venture capital fund he'd pitched. Cold red text blazed. Bridge funding request denied. It was over. 4 years. 4 relentless years since he founded Cognoscentient after his father's death from cruel Alzheimer's. 4 years of sleepless nights, meals scarfed at his desk, betting everything on a promise to build a tool so no child would watch a loved one fade into nothingness as he had. The technology was nearly complete, his AI algorithm showing breakthrough results in detecting early cognitive decline. But even the grandest dream can't survive without money. His last hope, a faint glimmer, lay across the globe. Malayan capital of Singapore, a colossal investment fund led by the famously ruthless Tan family. They didn't just invest in tech, they invested in perfection. And for them, perfection began with respect. They demanded a meeting with a specialized Korean interpreter, as a key biotech partner in Seoul would join remotely to evaluate. Then, as if to crush that final spark, a phone call came. An invisible punch flung Liam against a wall of despair. The interpreter, a top expert, was in a car accident, now in the ER. No one else could step in with less than 2 days' notice. Liam couldn't breathe. He paced his office like a caged animal, his panicked eyes fixed on his father's photo. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered. "I failed." He bolted from the office, leaving behind his crumbling shrine of dreams. He needed air. He needed silence. He wandered into the Boston Public Library, a majestic, solemn place where centuries of quiet seemed to drown the screams in his head. He sank into an oak chair among towering bookshelves, trying to breathe. And in that silent moment, he heard it. Not the whispers of readers, not the rustle of pages. A gentle, crystalline melody, like a flowing stream. A voice reading poetry in lilting Korean. It wasn't just phonetically perfect. It carried a wistful sadness, an understanding far beyond its years. Curious, Liam stood and followed the sound. He wove through massive rows of books, stopping at a secluded corner. There, on a small chair, back straight, sat a girl with sleek black hair tied neatly. Her bright, wide eyes were glued to an old poetry book. It was Elara Park. Liam recognized her. The daughter of Daniel, the kind janitor he nodded to each morning. He meant to turn away, not wanting to disturb her. But something in Elara's voice held him. He stood, listening, his inner storm strangely calming. When she finished the poem and looked up, she caught his gaze. She didn't flinch, her eyes holding an uncanny calm. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Did I bother you, sir?" Liam shook his head, a sad smile flickering. "No, you read beautifully. I've never heard anyone read Korean poetry with such feeling." Elara smiled, a smile that lit up her face. "My mom taught me. She was Korean, a literature professor." She paused, her gaze distant. She said, "Language is the home of the soul. No matter where you are, if you keep your homeland's voice, your soul won't get lost." Liam felt a familiar ache in her words. "Your mom. She must be so proud of you." "She's gone," Elara said quietly, not a tear in sight. "I read every day, to feel her close." Liam's heart clenched. A 9-year-old with a soul older than her years, carrying a loss he understood too well. He saw her intelligence, her fluency, her depth. And then an idea sparked. A crazy, irrational, desperate idea, one any sane person would dismiss instantly. But Liam Sterling, in that moment, had nothing left to lose. He took a deep breath, knelt on one knee to meet her eyes, and made an offer that could change all their lives forever. Liam Sterling's reason screamed in protest. This was madness. Placing the weight of $1 billion deal, the future of hundreds of people, on the shoulders of a 9-year-old was unforgivable. It was a blasphemy against both the business world and a child's innocence. But as he looked into Elara's eyes, he didn't see an ordinary child. He saw wisdom, a calm beyond her years, and most importantly, a connection. "Elara," he began, his voice hoarse with emotion and strain. I'm in a tough spot. I need to talk to some very important people from a faraway country. And They speak your mom's language. Korean. He paused, letting his words sink in. I can't find anyone else to help me talk to them. This meeting, it's a big deal. It could help a lot of people, like doctors do. He was careful not to mention money, shares, or bankruptcy. He spoke of help. Ilara looked at him, her wide eyes unblinking. She was silent for a long moment, processing his request. Then she asked a simple question. Are those people good, sir? Her question stunned Liam. Amid all his calculations, he'd forgotten the most basic thing. I believe so, he answered honestly. They're strict, but they're builders. They create jobs and good things. Ilara gave a small nod. My mom said helping people when they need it is the most important thing. If you need me, I'll help. Liam's heart surged, as if injected with a shot of adrenaline. But he knew the biggest hurdle lay ahead. He couldn't take Ilara anywhere without her father's permission. An hour later, in Cognisentient's office, Daniel Park stood frozen. He looked at Liam, then at his small daughter sitting quietly on an expensive leather sofa, her feet not touching the floor. Daniel was a humble man. His hands were calloused from labor, his eyes etched with exhaustion, but endlessly kind. After hearing Liam's explanation, he shook his head firmly. No hesitation. No way, Mr. Sterling, he said, his voice soft but resolute. I'm sorry for your troubles, but Ilara, she's just a kid. Your world, with its millions of dollars and high-stakes mind games, it's too cruel. I can't let my daughter step into that. Liam had expected this. He didn't argue. Instead, he picked up the photo of his father from his desk and handed it to Daniel. This is my dad, Mr. Park. He's why I started all this. He died of Alzheimer's. Every day, I watched a piece of his memory slip away. I promised myself I'd do everything to spare others that pain. Cognisentient isn't just a company to me. It's a vow. He met Daniel's eyes, raw sincerity bare. I'm not asking you to let Ilara fight a business war. I'm begging you to help me keep my promise to my dad. I know what it's like to do everything to honor someone gone. I see it in how Ilara reads her mom's poetry, and I believe you understand that too. Daniel Park fell silent. He looked at the photo of a stranger, then at Liam, the powerful CEO now standing before him with unguarded vulnerability. Finally, he turned to his daughter. Are you sure you want to do this, Ilara? He asked in Korean. Ilara stood, walked to her father, and took his rough hand. Appa, she said, her voice firm. I want to help. This is how I can use the gift Mom gave me. To do something good. Daniel let out a long breath, carrying a father's every worry. But seeing the resolve in his daughter's eyes, he knew he couldn't say no. He nodded. The next 24 hours were a whirlwind. Liam and his core team worked relentlessly with Ilara. They were stunned. She didn't just have a photographic memory. Her comprehension was extraordinary. Complex biomedical terms about neural networks and predictive analytics, she absorbed with astonishing speed. She didn't just memorize, she asked sharp questions to grasp the essence. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. A sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the building. Mr. Tan Kian Min stepped out, his presence radiating absolute authority, a modern emperor. Behind him was his son, David, younger, in a tailored designer suit, his keen eyes scanning everything. Liam and Ilara waited in the lobby. Ilara wore a simple blue dress, carefully ironed by her father, her hair neatly braided. She looked small and fragile in the vast marble space. As the Tans entered the boardroom, their gazes swept over Liam and lingered on Elara. Mr. Tan's face hardened instantly. His brow furrowed, irritation clear on his commanding forehead. He didn't spare Elara a second glance, turning to Liam, his voice low, laced with undisguised reproach. "Mr. Sterling," he said, each word like a cold stone. "I flew halfway across the world for serious business. I hope we can focus on professional matters." The room seemed to freeze. The air grew heavy. Tan's words were a bucket of ice water on Liam's efforts. His fragile hope, built on a girl's poetic voice and courage, seemed to shatter before it could even begin. Liam's heart sank. His worst nightmare was coming true. He'd made a terrible mistake. Placing his faith in a child, no matter how extraordinary, was suicide in this cutthroat business world. He'd insulted potential investors, and now he'd pay the price. He opened his mouth, scrambling for an apology, an explanation, knowing it was likely too late. But before a single word could escape, a small act shifted the room's entire dynamic. Elara Park, silent since entering, took a step forward. She didn't flinch under Mr. Tan's icy glare. With a dignity unthinkable for her age, she bowed deeply, a precise 90-degree insa, the formal Korean gesture of utmost respect. Then she rose, looking directly at the two investors, and spoke. Her voice was clear, unshaken, ringing through the room's silence. "Honorable Chairman Tan and Director, thank you for enduring the long journey." A flicker of surprise crossed Mr. Tan's stony face. David, his son, raised an eyebrow noticeably. They'd expected a fumbling excuse from Liam, but instead, a 9-year-old delivered a perfect, poised greeting. Her pronunciation, tone, and above all, her demeanor were flawless. Not the rote words of a coached child, but the address of someone with a deep cultural understanding. Mr. Tan cleared his throat, his initial irritation giving way to cautious curiosity. "Please, sit," he said curtly. A small first victory. Adrenaline surged through Liam. He sat up straighter, regaining confidence. The presentation began. Liam spoke, his voice shaky at first, but growing steadier as he poured out his passion. He described complex neural networks, predictive algorithms capable of analyzing terabytes of medical data to detect the earliest signs of cognitive decline. And Elara translated. But she wasn't just a conduit for words. She listened to Liam with intense focus, her eyes never leaving him, as if absorbing both the meaning and emotion behind each sentence. Then she turned to the investors, delivering the message. Her language was fluid, precise. When Liam used intricate technical terms, Elara didn't just translate. She wove simple metaphors to clarify, ensuring the core ideas shone through. David Tan, initially leaning back with arms crossed, picked up a pen and started taking notes. Even Mr. Tan leaned forward slightly, his sharp eyes no longer skeptical but appraising, like an expert sizing her up. He was listening. Finally, Liam reached the heart of his pitch. He clicked a remote and a photo of his father filled the large screen. "This technology," Liam said, his voice catching, "it's not just code or numbers. It started here, with my dad. I had to watch the wisest, strongest man I knew get lost in his own mind. Cognoscentient was born from a promise, to use everything I have to fight for others' memories." He finished. The room fell silent. This was the moment where human empathy met the cold calculus of business. Elara translated Liam's words faithfully, her voice softening, carrying the story's weight. When she finished, she didn't turn back to Liam. She paused. Then she looked directly at the Tans and spoke again in Korean. "In Korea, we have a saying," she began, her tone formal. "Beautiful words sent out return beautifully. It means respect and goodwill must go both ways." She continued, her gaze steady. "What Uncle Liam shared isn't just about a product. It's an act of filial piety, a value I know both Koreans and Singaporeans cherish deeply. He's not just building a company, he's keeping a promise to his late father." David Tan stopped writing. He looked up, his astonishment unmasked. He'd sat through hundreds of meetings, heard countless pitches, but never, not once, had he witnessed anything like this. And for the first time in the meeting, a crack appeared in Mr. Tan Kian Min's iron facade. The absolute coldness in his eyes gave way to something else. Reflection. Perhaps recognition. He no longer saw a desperate CEO and a makeshift interpreter. He saw a story, a legacy, a promise. Silence enveloped the room after Ilara's words. It wasn't awkward or uneasy. It was a heavy, contemplative silence, as if each word she spoke hung in the air, forcing everyone to weigh them. Liam held his breath, afraid a single exhale could shatter this fragile moment. Mr. Tan Kian Min broke the quiet. He cleared his throat, a soft sound that echoed in the room. He didn't glance at the financial charts or business plans on the table. Instead, he looked straight at Liam, and for the first time, his gaze wasn't that of an investor dissecting a deal, but of one man seeing another. "Mr. Sterling," he asked, his voice stripped of its earlier edge, now earnest and reflective. "What was your father like?" The question caught Liam off guard. He'd prepared for queries about ROI, market strategies, technical barriers. Not this. He looked at the photo on the screen, memories flooding back. "My father. He was an engineer," Liam began, his voice warming. "He believed every problem could be solved with enough smarts and patience. He taught me to build my first computer, taught me curiosity was the greatest gift. But the most important thing he taught me, not with words but actions, was kindness. Even as the disease ate away at his mind, that kindness stayed until the end." Ilara translated Liam's story, not just with words, but with empathy in her voice. She carried the warmth of his memories, building a bridge across cultures and generations. When Liam finished, Mr. Tan nodded slowly. An unspoken understanding seemed to form. The room's atmosphere shifted. It was no longer an interrogation, but a conversation. Then, like a switch flipping, Mr. Tan's face returned to its usual focus. The brief warmth retreated, replaced by the sharpness of a financier who'd battled markets for decades. "Thank you for sharing, Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice cold and decisive again. "Your story is moving, but in business, emotion is a luxury. Your technology has potential, but the risks are high. The market is brutal. We must protect our investment completely." He paused, locking eyes with Liam like a tiger sizing up prey. "We will invest," he declared. Liam's heart leapt. On one condition. Liam swallowed hard. What condition? 60% of Cognisentient's shares plus 2 board seats, one for me and one for David. That's our deal. The room seemed to tilt. The air drained from Liam's lungs. 60%. Not protection. A takeover. Tan wanted to swallow his company, turn his life's work, his promise to his father, into another asset in his vast portfolio. Saying no meant bankruptcy by next week. Saying yes meant surrendering the soul of everything he'd built. He was cornered, no escape. He glanced at David, hoping for an ally, but the younger man stayed silent, eyes fixed on the table, avoiding Liam's desperate gaze. Liam fell silent, his mind reeling, searching for a way out, an answer, a compromise. He found nothing, only the silence of looming defeat. And once again, Elara acted. She saw the deadlock, the anguish on Liam's face. With astonishing courage, she turned to the one person in the room who might still waver. "Director Tan," she said, her voice gentle but clear, addressing David directly. David looked up, startled to be called out by name. Elara met his eyes, her gaze clear and fearless. She asked a question unrelated to finance, one that cut to the heart of the matter. "Sir, what do you think true wealth is?" David blinked, unprepared for such a philosophical question. Elara pressed on, giving him no time to recover. Her voice stayed soft, but each word carried its own weight. Is it control or creation? The question hung in the air. A choice was laid bare, not for Liam, but for the heir to the Malayan capital empire. Control was his father's 60% demand. Creation was Liam Sterling's dying dream. The room was still as death. Mr. Tan's eyes narrowed, watching his son. Liam's gaze mixed hope with desperation. Everything, the entire future, now seemed to hinge on the answer of a young man forced to confront his father's shadow and redefine his own legacy. For David Tan, Elara's question wasn't just a question. It was a wake-up call, a bell that had been silent for his 30 years of life. He'd spent his entire existence under the towering shadow of his father, Mr. Tan Kian Min. He'd studied at the best schools, earned the most prestigious degrees, spoke flawless English, and understood the Western business world. But in every major decision, he was the obedient son, the heir who listened, destined to carry his father's legacy exactly as prescribed. Control was his father's philosophy. Control risk, assets, markets. And David had accepted it as unshakable truth. But this 9-year-old's question, posed with absolute clarity, pierced the shell of compliance he'd built. It forced him to face a truth he'd ignored. The world had changed. Silicon Valley, where he'd spent years learning, didn't thrive on control, but on the guided chaos of creation. The new tech giants weren't built by takeovers, but by empowering the brightest minds to soar freely. He looked up. His father's gaze was fixed on him, sharp as a blade, a wordless warning. Liam Sterling's eyes held fragile hope, and Elara Park's were simply patient, trusting. David made his choice. He turned to his father, and for the first time, he spoke not as a son, but as a partner. "Father," he began in English, a deliberate choice for a more equal footing. "You taught me, the smartest investment is in the future, and the future of this industry isn't in owning companies. It's in owning partnerships." Mr. Tan's brow furrowed, surprise and a hint of anger flaring. David pressed on, his voice growing surer. "What Mr. Sterling has built here isn't just an algorithm, it's a vision. One we can't control from Singapore. If we choke it with majority ownership, we'll kill the spirit that created it. We'll own a hollow shell, not a rocket engine." He pointed at Liam. "He doesn't need a boss. He needs a partner. Someone who can open doors to Asian markets, provide resources, but let him create freely. That's the investment model that built trillion-dollar companies in California. We shouldn't buy Cognisentient. We should bet on Liam Sterling." The room was dead silent. Liam looked at David with gratitude and astonishment beyond words. He'd never imagined his fiercest ally would be his rival's son. Mr. Tan Kian Min stared at his son. Fury rose in him. To be challenged by his own flesh and blood, in front of outsiders, was a humiliation. But through that anger, another feeling, one he hadn't felt in years, stirred. Surprise, and perhaps a flicker of pride. His son was no longer a shadow. He had a voice. He stayed silent so long, Liam thought he'd walk out. But then, he turned to Liam, and something unthinkable happened. A faint, almost imperceptible smile crossed his lips. "Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice still commanding but no longer domineering, "my son seems to have learned a few things in America. Maybe it's time this old man learned something too." He glanced at the business plan on the table, tapping it lightly. "All right. We'll do it the young people's way," he declared. "Malayan Capital will invest in Cognisentient. $400 million. Liam nearly fell out of his chair. The number was beyond his wildest dreams. "And," Mr. Tan continued, his eyes glinting with cunning, "we'll take only a 20% minority stake." A miracle had rained down. It wasn't just salvation. It was absolute trust. A handshake propelling Cognisentient to new heights. But Mr. Tan wasn't done. He turned to Elara, who'd quietly watched it all. "And you, young lady," he said, his voice warming unexpectedly. "Your wisdom is worth more than any financial analysis. To honor your contribution and the mother who raised you, Malayan Capital will establish a scholarship fund. The Professor Park Sujin Scholarship for Young Talent in Biotechnology, with an initial endowment of $5 million. This time, Liam and Elara were the ones stunned. A meeting that began with desperation and the threat of collapse ended with a multi-hundred-million-dollar deal and a lasting legacy for a woman they'd never met. As the Tans rose to shake hands, Mr. Tan did one final thing. He leaned down to Elara and with genuine warmth said, "Thank you, little teacher." In that moment, everyone in the room knew they hadn't just witnessed a successful deal. They'd seen a miracle. When the boardroom door closed behind the Tans, silence fell again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was light, almost buoyant. Liam Sterling stood motionless for a few seconds, his mind racing to catch up with reality. He looked around his office, at the equations scrawled on the board, at his father's photo, and then his gaze settled on the 9-year-old, standing humbly beside him. He laughed, not a loud laugh, but one born of pure relief, tinged with disbelief and boundless joy. He stepped forward and knelt before Elara, no longer a CEO, but simply a man who'd been saved. "Elara," he said, his voice trembling, I don't know what to say. Thank you isn't enough. You didn't just save my company. You saved my dream. You saved my promise." Elara smiled, a smile both innocent and deeply knowing. "Uncle Liam, I just did what my mom always taught me. Help a good person when they need it." Just then, the office door creaked open. Daniel Park stepped in, his face etched with worry. He'd waited outside for hours, each minute an eternity. Seeing Liam kneeling before his daughter, he braced for the worst. "Mr. Sterling, is everything okay?" he asked, voice cautious. Liam stood, his face glowing with uncontainable joy. He stepped forward and, to Daniel's shock, wrapped the gentle janitor in a hug. "Mr. Park," Liam said, pulling back, hands still on Daniel's shoulders, "we did it. They're investing." Daniel blinked, disbelieving. "Really?" "More than that," Liam said, his smile widening. "They're starting a scholarship fund. $5 million, sir. It'll carry your wife's name. The Professor Park Sujin Scholarship. Her legacy will lift young talent for generations. That's when Daniel Park broke. The strong man, who'd quietly toiled to raise his daughter, couldn't hold back tears. Not tears of sorrow, but of pride, validation, and boundless love for his late wife. He pulled Alara into his arms, his body shaking with emotion. His wife's wish, her legacy, didn't just live in their hearts. It would now shine, uplifting other dreams. The days that followed at Cognisentient felt like a dream. The gloom of impending bankruptcy gave way to crackling energy. Engineers worked with fresh enthusiasm. Legal teams scrambled to finalize the deal of the century. Liam felt like he was walking on clouds. He'd done it. He hadn't just saved the company. He'd found incredible friends and partners. But in this world, the brighter the light, the sharper the shadows it casts. In another sleek Boston office, Donovan Reed, CEO of Ethel Metrics, read insider reports of Cognisentient's deal with unconcealed rage. Donovan had once been Liam's mentor, guiding him in his early startup days. But as Liam's star rose, envy and greed turned Donovan into a ruthless rival. He couldn't stomach his former protege's resounding success, a triumph he himself coveted. And Donovan decided to strike in the most insidious, underhanded way. One morning, as Liam met with his team, his phone buzzed relentlessly. At the same moment, his assistant burst in, face pale, clutching a tablet. "Liam, you need to see this," she said, voice shaking. Liam took the tablet. The screen showed the front page of a respected financial paper, its headline glaring and venomous. Boston tech CEO accused of exploiting immigrant janitor's daughter in billion-dollar deal with Asian investors. The article, citing anonymous sources, painted a twisted tale. It cast Liam as a cunning opportunist who'd found a naive girl with language skills and staged a sob story to dupe gullible investors. It turned Alara from a quiet hero into a pitiful victim of exploitation. It portrayed Daniel Park as a greedy father, willing to sell his daughter's innocence. And it implied the Singapore investors were charmed by a cheap ploy. Liam's world flipped upside down. The joy and pride of the past days vanished, replaced by a surge of fury and disgust in his chest. His enemy hadn't attacked his technology. They'd struck at what mattered most, his honor and the safety of an innocent girl. The real storm was just beginning. The storm hit without warning, fiercer than anything Liam Sterling could have imagined. Within an hour, the venomous article spread like wildfire. Cognisentient's phones rang incessantly. Journalists, bloggers, and social media vultures all wanted a piece of the bombshell story. Partners called, voices thick with concern. Inside the company, whispers rippled through departments. Faces once bright with hope now bore traces of unease. Liam's head of PR, a seasoned woman, stormed into his office, her face drained of color. "Liam," she said, "this is a PR crisis on a catastrophic scale. The story's too juicy, too believable. A powerful white CEO, an innocent immigrant girl. The public will tear us apart." Liam sat frozen in his chair, gripping the tablet so tightly his knuckles whitened. His initial fury gave way to crushing guilt. He'd dragged an innocent family into his ruthless fight. Their kindness had become a weapon for others to wield against them. He looked at his father's photo and felt shame. Just then, his private phone buzzed. The screen flashed a name that made his heart clench. Mr. Tan Kian Min. This was it, the moment of judgment. The partner who'd just bet hundreds of millions on him would likely pull out. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his voice. "Mr. Tan," he said. "Mr. Sterling. Tan's voice came through, stern and emotionless. I've read the article. Liam closed his eyes. Sir, I'm so sorry. Silence. Tan cut in, but his tone held no anger toward Liam. Listen to me. Whoever wrote this garbage, and whoever fed them the information, made a fatal mistake. Liam blinked, caught off guard. What do you mean, sir? They didn't just insult you, Mr. Sterling. Tan's voice turned steel cold. They insulted my judgment. They dare suggest that I, Tan Kian Min, and my son could be fooled by a sob story. They've turned a deal built on respect and vision into a farce. He paused, then continued. We won't stay silent. We'll fight back. Prepare yourself. David and I are flying to Boston tonight. The call ended. Liam was stunned. He'd braced for abandonment. Instead, he'd gained his fiercest ally. Tan's trust, once given, seemed unbreakable. It fueled Liam's resolve to defend Ilara and her father's honor more than ever. He knew what he had to do. He had to see them. The Park family's apartment sat in a modest complex. When Liam knocked, Daniel opened the door, his face heavy with worry, eyes more sunken than usual. The TV droned a news report, Liam and Ilara's names audible in the background. Mr. Park, Liam began, his voice thick with regret. I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry. I should have seen this coming. I should have protected you both better. Daniel looked at him, his eyes free of blame, only pain. Mr. Sterling, it's not your fault. It's those with cruel hearts. He sighed. They're calling my girl a victim on TV. They don't know anything. Ilara. She's my hero. Ilara stepped out from an inner room, having heard everything. Unlike the men's anxiety, her face was calm. She looked at Liam, her eyes clear and direct. They're lying, Uncle Liam, she said, her voice simple but powerful. Why should we be afraid of lies? Ilara's question was a lightning bolt, shattering the cloud of fear and guilt enveloping Liam. She was right. Truth was truth, no matter how many lies tried to bury it. And they had truth on their side. Her courage ignited his. He looked at the Parks, a plan forming. We won't hide, Liam said, his voice now firm. We'll face them. We'll hold a press conference. And we'll tell the truth together. He looked at Daniel and Ilara. I need you both by my side. Not as victims, but as partners. Will you stand with me? Daniel looked at his daughter. He saw courage, integrity, and his late wife's legacy in her eyes. He nodded, a slow but resolute gesture. In that small apartment, amid the howling media storm outside, a front was formed. They were no longer a CEO, a janitor, and a child. They were a united front, built on truth, trust, and love, and they were ready to fight. The press conference room at Boston's Four Seasons was packed. Flashes from hundreds of cameras flickered like lightning, creating an overwhelming, hostile atmosphere. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the predatory hunger for news, like vultures circling prey. Journalists, from major outlets to scandal-chasing bloggers, stood ready with questions sharp as daggers. Then the door swung open. All eyes locked onto them. Liam Sterling stepped in first, in a perfectly tailored suit, his face not fearful, but calmly resolute. He wasn't alone. Beside him was Daniel Park, in his best clothes, simple but clean and dignified, holding his daughter's hand tightly. Ilara wore her blue dress again, hair neatly braided. The biggest shock to the media was the two men flanking them, like steadfast guards. Mr. Tan Kian Min and David Tan, freshly arrived from Singapore, their faces radiating unyielding authority. They didn't walk in as defendants. They walked in as a united front. Liam stepped to the podium, adjusting the mic. The room fell silent, save for the click of cameras. "Thank you for coming," Liam began, his voice clear and steely. "I know there's been a lot of questions and rumors in the last 24 hours. Today, we're not here to answer gossip. We're here to tell a true story." He briefly recounted the fateful meeting, the interpreter's sudden accident, and how Elara stepped up to help. He spoke of Cognisentient's vision, his promise to his father. Then he paused, looking straight into the crowd. "That article called me an exploiter, but the real hero of this story isn't me. And the victim is certainly not the brave girl standing here. I'd like to introduce you to her father, Mr. Daniel Park." Liam stepped back, giving the floor to Daniel. Daniel Park approached, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the podium. He'd never faced so many people or cameras. He took a deep breath. I'm just a janitor," he began, his voice honest and unpolished. "My wife, she was a professor. She taught our daughter about self-respect, kindness, and pride in her heritage. When Elara chose to help Mr. Sterling, it wasn't for money or fame. She did it to honor her mother." His voice caught, but he pressed on. "The press called my daughter a victim, but to me and to my wife's soul in heaven, she's a pride. She used the greatest gift her mother gave her to help a good man in need. If that's exploitation, I wish the world had more of it." Daniel's sincerity silenced many reporters, forcing reflection. But some wouldn't relent. A tabloid journalist raised her mic, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Touching story, Mr. Park. But let's be real. Elara," she said, turning to the girl, "tell the truth. Did Mr. Sterling coach you on what to say in that meeting? Did he promise you some big reward?" The room held its breath. The question was cruel, designed to trap a child. Liam and Daniel moved to shield Elara, but she stepped forward on her own. She stood on tiptoe to reach the mic. Her clear, fearless eyes met the reporters. "Ma'am," Elara said, her young voice steady. "Uncle Liam didn't tell me what to say. He just shared his dream with me. A dream to save moms and dads from being forgotten." She paused, then continued. "My mom taught me that when you help someone, the greatest reward isn't what you get. It's the warmth in your heart." "I think," she said, scanning the room, "the hearts of people who lie must be very cold." Absolute silence followed. Elara's innocent yet profound response cut through the room's cynicism like a blade. The reporter flushed, awkwardly lowering her mic. Before anyone could recover, Mr. Tan Kian Min stepped up, taking Liam's place at the podium. He needed no mic. His commanding voice filled the space. "I am Tan Kian Min, chairman of Malayan Capital," he declared. "Let me be clear. Our judgment rests on data, vision, and character. We saw all three in Cognisentient and in Liam Sterling. Anyone who thinks we could be swayed by a stunt is either a fool or dangerously underestimates us." He stared directly at a central camera. "So, I announce, our investment deal not only stands, but we're deepening this partnership. Malayan Capital is proud to be Cognisentient's strategic ally." Then he ended with a chilling warning. "In Singapore, we have a saying, don't throw stones at a hornet's nest. Malayan Capital is a very, very large nest. We will protect our investments and partners at all costs." He was done. The press conference ended. No more questions. Reporters, instead of firing barbed queries, scrambled to type, knowing they'd just gotten a story bigger than the initial scandal. A story of truth, honor, and the power of a compassionate heart. The five of them stood together on the podium under flashing lights, no longer separate individuals, but a symbol of unbreakable unity. They'd faced the storm and won. As the press conference door closed, sealing them off from the noisy world outside, the five of them exchanged looks, and a relieved silence settled in. David Tan broke it first, laughing and shaking his head in disbelief. "I've been in negotiations in London, Shanghai, New York," he said. "But I've never seen a counterattack this spectacular. Elara, you're a true star." Mr. Tan Kian Min, his face now relaxed, placed a hand on Liam's shoulder. "Mr. Sterling, you've shown the grit of a real leader. You didn't just protect your company, you protected your people. That's what matters." He turned to Daniel, still teary with emotion, and bowed respectfully. "Mr. Park, you've raised an extraordinary daughter. The world should learn from your family's integrity." That evening, they didn't celebrate in a fancy restaurant. They shared a simple, warm meal in the hotel suite, talking about the future, cognisentience growth, and the Park Soo-jin scholarship. For the first time, their bond wasn't just investor and startup. It was a true alliance, a friendship forged through fire. The weeks that followed buzzed with positivity. The media storm flipped entirely. The tale of the interpreter girl and the financial titan became a Boston legend, an inspiring story of courage and truth. Donovan Reed and his tabloid faced a fierce backlash and business community boycott. The cogni-sentient Malayan capital deal closed swiftly. The future had never looked brighter. But fate, it seemed, still held surprises. One afternoon, as Liam reviewed expansion plans, an email arrived. It wasn't a typical work message. Sent from one of Seoul's most prestigious law firms, its subject was formal, regarding the legacy of the late Dr. Park Jin-woo and connection to Ms. Park Soo-jin. Liam frowned. Park Soo-jin was Elara's mother. But Park Jin-woo, he'd never heard the name. Assuming it might be a distant relative or a mix-up, he noted the email's request for an urgent video call to discuss legal inheritance matters directly affecting Ms. Elara Park. Feeling responsible, Liam arranged the call and invited Daniel and Elara to his office. He thought he was just helping with complex paperwork. He had no idea he was about to face a truth that could change everything again. On the large meeting room screen, an older man in an impeccable suit appeared. He introduced himself as Attorney Choi, executor of Dr. Park Jin-woo's will. His voice was deep and solemn. "Mr. Sterling, Mr. Park," he began, "I'm here to fulfill the final wishes of my client, one of South Korea's greatest tech minds." He explained that Dr. Park Jin-woo was a reclusive legend, a pioneer in deep learning and AI. Throughout his career, he had a trusted protege, a secret collaborator he cherished like a daughter. That person, Choi said, was Professor Park Soo-jin, Elara's mother. Daniel and Liam exchanged stunned glances. To let his adopted daughter build her academic career free from his shadow, Choi continued. Dr. Park kept their bond secret. He had no biological children, and in his will, he left his entire estate and intellectual legacy to Professor Park Soo-jin. Since she's passed, by law, the sole rightful heir is her daughter, Ms. Elara Park. Liam struggled to process this. Elara, heir to a tech legend. That estate, Choi said as things turned surreal, is not just money. It's the entire portfolio of foundational patents on deep learning and pattern recognition developed by Dr. Park over his lifetime. Choi shared his screen, displaying a complex legal document. He pointed to a specific line. Among them is a critical patent, KR 10078945, for nonlinear pattern recognition algorithm structure. In another corner of the call, Liam's head of legal, also attending, gasped. Her face paled. "Liam," she interjected, voice panicked. "That patent. We know it. We're using it. We licensed it from a European parent company, thinking it was standard tech." Choi nodded gravely. "Correct. A shell company Dr. Park set up to manage his intellectual property. And now, its legal ownership belongs to the person sitting in this room with you." The room fell silent. Liam looked at Alara, who sat bewildered, not grasping what was happening. He'd just realized a staggering truth. The 9-year-old who saved his company from collapse was, unknowingly, the legal owner of a core piece of cognisentience technology, its very heart. Their relationship was no longer just savior and saved. It had become infinitely more complex. The cognisentient meeting room was engulfed in stunned silence. Attorney Choi's revelation was more shocking than the multi-hundred-million-dollar investment deal. It had reshuffled the entire chessboard, fundamentally altering everyone's relationships. Liam's head of legal, face ashen, knew better than anyone the potential legal quagmire. Technically, their company was infringing on a patent owned by the very girl who'd saved them. Daniel Park looked utterly lost. He glanced at his daughter, then at Liam, unable to fathom how his late wife, a literature professor, could be tied to the technological heart of a Boston corporation. But Liam Sterling, after a moment of initial shock, did something unexpected. He leaned back in his chair and laughed. Not a laugh of joy, but one of sheer amazement at fate's irony. "The universe has a sense of humor," he said, shaking his head. He looked into Elara's still confused eyes. She'd saved him. And now, it turned out, he'd built part of his dream on a foundation her family had laid. This wasn't coincidence. It was destiny. He turned to his legal team, his expression turning serious and resolute, his voice unwavering. "Prepare all necessary documents," he ordered. "We'll conduct a fair valuation of this patent. Based on that, we'll transfer a corresponding share of Cognisentient to Alara Park. No questions, no negotiations. This isn't a deal. It's the right thing to do." He faced the screen, meeting Attorney Choi's eyes. "Counselor, we won't just acknowledge Alara's ownership. We want to invite her, as the heir to Dr. Park Jin-woo and Professor Park Soo-jin's legacy, to become an honorary founding partner of ours. We don't see this as a legal problem. We see it as a merger of legacies." 6 months later. In a state-of-the-art international convention center in Seoul, South Korea, the air buzzed with excitement. Tech leaders, biomedical researchers, investors, and journalists from around the world gathered to witness the official launch of a groundbreaking organization, the Sterling Park Global Health Initiative. On the grand stage, under dazzling lights, Alara Park, now nearly 10, looked transformed. She wore a stunning modernized hanbok, her hair elegantly pinned up. No longer the shy library girl or reluctant interpreter. She was a symbol today. She stepped to the podium, and the vast auditorium fell silent. "Hello, everyone," she began in Korean, her clear voice resonating, then switched to fluent English. 6 months ago, I was just a girl who loved reading my mom's poetry. Today I stand here to talk about legacy. Not just my mother's, Professor Park Soo-jin, or her great collaborator, Dr. Park Jin-woo, but also the legacy of a father who fought illness with a smile, Uncle Liam's dad. She glanced at the front row, where Liam, her father, and the Tans sat, their eyes brimming with pride. They were silent giants who gave us a foundation. I've learned that technology, no matter how smart, is just a tool. It has no heart. It's our stories, our promises, and our love that breathe soul into it. She gestured to the large screen where images of smiling, sick children appeared. The Sterling Park Initiative isn't just about AI or data. It's about giving kids more sunny days, parents more smiles. Technology can create miracles, but only human hearts know how to use them right. As Ilara finished, the auditorium erupted in a standing ovation. Tears glistened on many faces. They weren't clapping for a speech. They were clapping for an extraordinary story of hope, of human connection. That evening, on a hotel rooftop overlooking Seoul's twinkling skyline, just three stood together: Liam, Daniel, and Ilara. They gazed at the city below. "Uncle Liam," Ilara asked softly, her voice clear in the night, "do you think Mom and Dr. Park are watching us from the sky?" Liam smiled, resting a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sure they are, Ilara. And they're not just watching. They're smiling. So proud of you." Daniel stood beside them, quietly wiping a tear of joy. He looked up at the night sky, feeling his wife's presence closer than ever. A legacy isn't just what we leave behind. The true legacy is the seeds we sow in others' lives. The story of Liam, Ilara, and Daniel reminds us that a person's greatest value isn't in patents or bank accounts, but in character. And it shows courage can come in the form of a 9-year-old, and redemption can rise from the unlikeliest places. In the end, a miracle isn't something that happens to us. It's a choice. The choice to trust when everything's against you. The choice to do what's right when it's the hardest. And the choice to use your gift, big or small, to light a candle in the dark.